As the crew of colliers off Newcastle has grown, so has the cloud over the Hunter's reputation to ship its coal. What should have been a golden period is fast becoming a nightmare as Coal and Allied and the Ozstar mine both cut production and employment because of limits on the amount of coal they can ship from Port Waratah.
How could we possibly be losing jobs in the middle of the greatest coal boom in the history of the nation?
It's just beyond a joke, and I'm so angry, I'm so disappointed that the industry that's made billions and billions of dollars out of this boom hasn't had the foresight to invest enough in infrastructure.
While PWCS defends rationing of its loaders to clear the 70-plus ship backlog, the state opposition blames the Yemma and Carr governments for delaying approval of the $1 billion third loader for Newcastle Coal Infrastructure Group.
You can't instantly add water to a new coal loader and expect it to be there tomorrow.
As far as those closest to the workers losing their jobs are concerned, it's now time for leadership to uncork Newcastle's bottleneck.
We'll encourage our members to continue to do their best for the industry, but we want the bosses to do theirs as well.
We just need some leadership, we need the problem fixed, and each level of government and the companies all have to take their share of responsibility.
Gary Blair, NBN News.
If you've appointed a power of attorney to manage your money and assets, you might want to reconsider your choice. Research shows that a power of attorney is one of the highest causes of financial abuse and money mismanagement, especially for older women.
People who are our attorneys don't necessarily understand that they have to really keep their money and the older person or the other person's money quite separate, and so there can be mismanagement of funds.
Going guarantor on a loan is also risky. Homeowners warned against using their assets as collateral for their children to take loans on unless they seek independent financial and legal advice.
Say objectively, if this wasn't my child, would I do it? Would it still be a good business sort of arrangement? And bottom line, can I afford to lose this money?
As properties in aged care facilities are expensive, some children are offering to build a dwelling for their parent on their own land. Sue Field advises those considering that move to talk it through and ask the hard questions.
If I sell up and come and live with you and you extend your house, would my name be on the title? What would happen if you divorced? What would happen if you got a promotion or somewhere and went to live somewhere else?
Christy Carter, NBN News.
While the Newcastle Jets completed their last couple of weeks of training and team bonding before a month off, their coach has been on the other side of the world. Gary Van Egmond has spent the last 12 days talent scouting in Rio de Janeiro, and it sounds like a coach's dream.
There's a fairly well-known player to all of us called Juninho, who played at Middlesbrough and played in Spain consistently, and he can't even get in their first grade squad. So the talent pool it's unbelievable.
The Jets are hoping to reproduce the success that came with Colombian striker Milton Rodriguez and of course imitate Melbourne's triumphs with Brazilian import Fred.
There was plenty of Freds running around. There's some really exceptional players, and if we can get any of these players to come to Australia, they'll definitely be a massive hit.
Now comes the hard part, narrowing the field down from half a dozen to just 2 strikers. And then there's the negotiating with agents and players over finances. And after 2 seasons with the Jets, Jade North's future is still up in the air. The Newcastle club has put an offer on the table, but the defender's agent is still attempting to seal a contract for him overseas, perhaps in Europe or Asia.
Somewhere like maybe Japan as well, Korea. But at the moment, hopefully anywhere in Europe is pretty good, for a stepping stone. So it's all about timing, luck, and just got to get myself over there.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News. Last year's champion Bob Doust certainly was on target this afternoon and a definite crowd pleaser with this perfect draw shot. But consistency failed him this time around, going down to Ian Lean from Valentine. It was down to the quarterfinals this afternoon with competition fierce at the Lowlands Bowling Green. The final 4 will fight it out tomorrow morning. To tennis, and don't let the size of these kids fool you. They certainly mean business at the State Primary School's Tennis Carnival. How'd you like to be on the receiving end of this? Brandon Parry from East Maitland Public School put up a strong fight for the Hunter team today, but eventually went down 6-3. The week-long event wraps up tomorrow. Unfortunately, our local champions didn't make the final, outclassed by Sydney West in the semis. Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
The high-profile union boss was in Lake Macquarie today, pressing the flesh with union members, and took the opportunity to announce his political intentions.
I will seek Labor Party pre-selection for the federal seat of Charlton.
Mr Combet and sitting member Kelly Hoare have both nominated for pre-selection in the seat, but it seems clear that the party will back its star recruit. Not surprisingly, after 9 years in office, the 44-year-old says she's been shafted by senior members of the party.
I think they're treacherous. I think they lack any concept of decency.
Despite her disappointment, she's ruled out suing the ALP for unfair dismissal and is preparing to get on with life after politics.
I've had my electorate taken away, my job taken away and my income taken away. So we as a family just need to sit down and reassess what we're going to do.
After growing up in Sydney and living in Melbourne, Mr Combet concedes he has plenty of homework to do on the electorate after being asked the name of the main street of Toronto.
Well, that is one thing that I cannot say at the moment. I've got a lot to learn about the local area.
For the record, it's the Boulevard. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
It's a remarkable historic find with particular significance for the local Warramai tribe, with a burial site in the Stockton sand dunes uncovered for the first time in about 4 centuries. Found close to Aboriginal middens, the skeleton is believed to be that of a 20 to 30-year-old man who had been buried in the sand.
He has been possibly here for 300 to 400 years, and the skeletal remains are fairly intact.
Indigenous archaeologist and Warramia traditional owner Len Anderson was called to the site, along with police, forensics and a local anthropologist who was able to establish the age of the bones. Glenn Cameron knows these sand dunes like the back of his hand, and from a distance he knew the bones weren't part of a midden. He quickly alerted police of his discovery.
And looked up on the sand dune and on a ridge there was what looked to be human remains. So drove over and had a bit of a closer look. And yeah, it was what, as I said, appeared to be a skeleton.
In respecting Aboriginal culture, photographs and video footage of the remains should not be taken, and people are being warned to stay away.
Yes, it is very important. It's significant. It's a burial. It's not in a cemetery, so therefore it's even more significant for protection.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
It's a towering eyesore like this one along Industrial Drive that residents of Mayfield East are fighting against in their backyard.
Why does it have to go right next to people's houses?
Newcastle City Council has deferred making a decision on whether to allow Telstra to construct a mobile phone tower at the back of this George Street business until its next meeting in a fortnight. But Lord Mayor John Tate says that if Council doesn't approve the tower, the Land and Environment Court could. So instead of quashing the project, Council's pushing for the tower to be as aesthetically appealing as possible.
When it comes back to Council, it'll be in some form of modified address, because the Council took the position that the one that's going to Lambton Park, which is now before the Land and Environment Court for consideration, has been modified slightly.
Council says the BHP site just 200 metres down the road was not available for use, claiming it's closer to a school than the proposed location. The irony is that the tower will instead be built in the backyard of many of the children who attend the school, the move prompting health concerns from parents.
Concerned about the kids more than anything else. Get to the stage when you get older that your own health doesn't matter as much, but with kids, yeah.
The Mayfield East Residents Group says it'll continue to push to have the tower built elsewhere.
Community feeling, people are saying that we should not be allowing this development to take place without properly considering the impacts.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
Employment was maintained at a very high level despite interest rate increases, despite weaker demand, the drought, the higher Australian dollar, all of those things which are stressing regional businesses.
The Tocal Field Days put products and technology at the fingertips of around 30,000 producers across 3 days.
People come to seek out expert advice. They come to check out the latest products and services.
This year, the event's focus is on doing things more effectively. Water is the feature, with advice for farmers on how to save it, how to harvest it effectively, and how to produce quality stock through the drought. It seems the continued big dry is forcing farmers to change their approach to producing livestock. New genetic breeds of cattle are emerging, such as the Drought Master.
They're a little bit hardier in that they don't wither away quite as quickly when the things get tough, and they also will go a bit higher and a bit further looking for feed. They've got very good walking ability, so if there's feed around, they'll walk to it neat.
Damara sheep are also growing in popularity, able to survive for 3.5 days without water, but watch your washing, they eat like goats. From people looking to buy to others wanting to try, it seems not even a limited cash flow thanks to the drought could curb the window shopping. It's all there, from the colourful to the inquisitive, to donkeys giving the show horses some competition. But not to be overlooked, this heavyweight of the beef industry, weighing in at 850 kilos or as much as a small motor vehicle. Christy Carter, NBN News.
Arriving back from Coffs Harbour today, the Knights trio hardly had a spring in their step, but they have just 48 hours before strapping on the boots once again against the Bulldogs.
Mentally, I'll just sort of, in the next couple of days, I'll get my head around playing on Sunday. Obviously disappointed about last night, but again, fortunately enough, you're playing against the Dogs, so you know you've got to get yourself up for the game.
We didn't pull up too bad, pulled up a little bit sore as you do after a game, but come Sunday, we should be right to go again.
And the coach needs them to, with a range of injuries stretching the club's backline depth. Adam McDougall showed improvement today, but Gidley may yet swap Country's number 6 for that of his club.
Yeah, I guess so. Whatever's best for the team. I guess I'll play wherever sort of thing. But I've been enjoying fullback back there. But if it means 5'8", I'll play there.
As for the game last night, Gidley came within a whisker of pulling off a last-minute leveller. While the poor crowd at Coffs Harbour also had the Country boys shaking their heads.
I thought it was extremely disappointing, actually, considering that the game's doing its best to take it back to the Country.
Jim Callanan, NBN News. Born in Tamworth and based in Terrigal, Billy Jolliffe started the Elite Men Cruiser Class final as the one to beat, but even favourites get no favours from the track. It opened the door for the field to take control, and as Lee Darrell headed for home first, Jolliffe was left a lone figure as he limped back in. Better luck for world champion Ashley McCutcheon in the junior men final. He was pushed all the way though by hometown boy Chris Westwood, who finished second. From bikes to bowls, and after 5 days of competition, the final of the Newcastle City Men's Masters was rolled out at the Lowlands Club today, with Valentine's Ian Lean up against Leonard Scott. The Raymond Terrace Premier League player, who beat Nathan Dawson in the semi-finals, did his best to keep pace with Lean. But he couldn't catch him over the closing ends. Lean, a convincing 11-shot winner. In Newcastle Rugby League, there's 3 games tomorrow, while 2 derbies highlight action on Sunday, with Nelson Bay hosting the Terrace and South Newcastle playing West. Merewether will be looking to stretch its unbeaten run in Newcastle and Hunter Rugby to 4 games when it plays the Blacks in Maitland tomorrow. While all NBN State Football League games are on Sunday, with the top-of-the-table clash between Azuri FC and South Cardiff the feature.
but I'm really pleased and I'm looking forward to getting started on the campaigning in the seat of Charlton and talking to people about the issues and asking for their support.
We are getting through the agenda. The things that we're not getting through are the peripheral things which take up a lot of debate but are not central at times to what we're about.
The King of the Ranges isn't called the Stockman's Challenge for nothing. The bareback obstacle course is one of the toughest events, but local Shane Easy certainly made it look easy, completing it without the allowed bridle or halter. And if that wasn't showing off, then how about this? It's these shiny belt buckles the stockmen and women are vying for, the locals in with a chance ahead of tomorrow's finals.
There's a couple of rookie guys who have entered for the first time. They're locals and they look like they'll make the final. So, yeah, I think the final this year will be a whole new lot of people.
Also on show, the pack horse, the shoeing and the whip crack, events which have stood the test of time. Every man, his dog and even his horse was headed to this year's event, which is being held despite the drought.
We've had heaps of cattle. It's only camp draft probably in the last 4 months it's actually gone ahead.
It's a different story in nearby Scone. There, the drought has taken its toll on cattle numbers, forcing the cancellation of its annual camp draft run as part of the Horse Festival. But the rodeo, which this year boasts a $15,000 prize purse, will still buck into action.
We received our entry numbers there yesterday and we've got record entries, and we're also this year now that we've got more prize money than any other rodeo in the state, which is a pretty big thing for Scone.
Christy Carter, NBN News.
The game was held up to slippery stickers on the playing surface, which were keen to remain holding court. When things did get underway, Alex Harding went straight to work for the Jaegers. But so did the Thunderbirds, who looked right on their game after suffering a first-round loss. And once they took the initiative, the home side didn't let up. Hunter quickly forced into high-risk plays, which at first came off. Chief scorer Alex Harding came under all sorts of added pressure though, as the points kept coming thick and fast, care of the Thunderbirds. The Jaegers made constant changes throughout to try and stem the tide, but Adelaide was in full swing by the final term and ran away impressive 17-point winners.
It was a clear sign of a council addressing a crisis. Lord Mayor John Tate today calling the first ever council meeting held on a Sunday. 8 councillors filed in one by one for the closed-door session. It came a day after Council's General Manager Janet Daw allegedly broke ranks and publicly described the council as dysfunctional and claimed councillors can't work with council officers. While Councillor Aaron Buman agrees with the alleged statement, he says the GM is partly to blame for council's problems.
We are overstaffed, we waste millions of dollars endlessly, and I think after her being there for the last 8 years, it's coming back to bite her.
After today's meeting, the Mayor released a statement saying Council has resolved to call for information in relation to a number of options discussed, including advice as to whether the General Manager has breached the Council's Code of Conduct. Christy Carter, NBN News.
South started with a huge monkey on their back. They hadn't beat West on their home ground since 1999, but the Rosellas gifted the home side first points with a mistake allowing Michael Fortier to cross on the very next play. Sheer pace resulted in more points, with Daniel Spiteri turning on the afterburners to scoot across for a second. It was left to Chris Schneider to inspire West's first points, and Peter Mannion was rewarded for backing up. But Souths were desperate, and it showed. On the stroke of half-time, the hard work paid off, with Bowen sending 40 away for another. The second half was a real battle, but this high shot could have much wider problems for James King, with West hooker Dave Thomas coming off much the worse for wear. It inspired a big comeback from the Rosellas, who managed to level it up 22-all in what was an exciting finish. Souths got themselves back into a 6-point lead with another 40 try, but the game wasn't sewn up just yet. The Rosellas scoring in the corner with the clock all but gone. A successful conversion would have forced a draw. It missed, allowing Souths a memorable victory.
Graffiti, vandalism and antisocial behaviour have been an escalating problem in Nelson Bay in recent months.
Just about every weekend there's damage done.
Now a $95,000 federal grant will see 16 closed-circuit television cameras installed outside businesses in Stockton and Magnus Streets and in Apex Park, an area which police call a crime hotspot.
We think it's a great step forward to curbing the crime rate.
Peter Clough says the cameras aren't so much to deter vandals, but to help catch them.
Won't be monitored, constantly. It'll be mainly used for recording activity in the streets and in the park, for use for future prosecutions or for assistance to the police.
Nearby Tanilba Bay has also had extensive problems with vandalism and antisocial behaviour. Member for Patterson, Bob Baldwin, says if Nelson Bay's CCTV cameras prove successful in catching vandals, he'll push for a federal government grant to install cameras at trouble spots in Tanilba Bay. Christy Carter, NBN News.
How on earth did it get this bad? Newcastle's inner-city streets overrun by drunks and ruled by fear late at night. According to police, Newcastle has never attracted so many late-night visitors. Earlier closing times and newly imposed curfews in areas like the Central Coast and Maitland, attracting out-of-town revellers to the city like moths to a flame.
So the increase we've seen in assaults are probably proportionate to the increase of people we've had coming here.
Police say city assaults in particular have been on the rise since October. However, it's only since March that our streets have been branded unsafe and late-night no-go zones by residents and the business community. The death of 88-year-old Lily Wood at her Cooks Hill home on the 2nd of March, followed 10 days later by the unsolved murder of Cooks Hill business identity 87-year-old Frank Newbury inside his grocery store, added to community fears.
It was an unfortunate situation having those two prominent murders. It did highlight the fact even further for the media and the community that there was a level of fear in the area.
Add to the mix a spate of vicious assaults in which one man was left in a critical condition after being set upon by a gang and another suffered massive head injuries after being king hit. And it's easy to see what's fueled the community's concern. And according to police figures, that fear is more than founded, with Newcastle's inner city now listed as having the state's third highest rate of people committing crimes after drinking at a licensed venue or being victims of violent crime. Tomorrow night we explore the proposed lockout on the region's pubs and clubs and find out what police are doing to try and control the situation. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The 18-year-old was travelling along Martins Creek Road near Patterson when she veered off the road, rolled several times, the car landing on its roof. Ambulance paramedics treated the woman on the scene before she was flown by the Westpac Rescue helicopter to Newcastle for treatment.
It means we can immediately start to look at construction of a new club complex at Cardiff, and we now have the cash to sit down and officially look at a master plan for the Newcastle site.
The Boeing 737-200 touched down this morning, having travelled 1,300 kilometres from Norfolk Island, only to turn around and take a full flight back 1 hour later. While Newcastle Airport's dalliance into international flights with Freedom Air's New Zealand service failed, advances in online booking are being touted as the difference this time round. The occasion was well worth celebrating, according to officials, who see departures to other exotic locations on the horizon.
It augurs well strategically for us into the future as we can see that we can now prepare and demonstrate our readiness for other international destinations.
Norfolk Air is targeting its weekly service at residents from the Central Coast to Mid-North Coast of New South Wales who want to avoid travelling to and parking at busy Sydney Airport.
I think it's important to recognise that we're obviously established already in Brisbane and Sydney, and we wanted a complementary gateway. Newcastle sort of stacked up, but it was always a risk. At the end of the day, you do as much research as you can, but then you put it out to the market and see how it responds.
Tourism on Norfolk rakes in $80 million per year. Its laid-back village vibe is particularly popular with retirees. Much of the island's appeal comes from its rich colonial heritage, with many residents direct descendants of the bounty mutineers that settled here in 1856. With so many shared surnames, the phone book actually reverts to calling people by their nicknames. With visitor numbers down since booming in 2001, the challenge is now on to change the profile of the typical Norfolk tourist. Jessica Phyllis, NBN News.
By his own admission, the leg injury has been something of a lottery of late, with each day a different proposition.
He just spoke to me just then. He said, if I'm not running by Thursday, he doesn't want to risk me, and because we're at the bye next week. So, could have this week off, then the bye, and then come back, everything cleared then.
With 5'8" Daniel Abraham also injured, it leaves coach Brian Smith in a real spot as he's forced to use utility players in specialist roles.
I've played pretty much all over the park this year, and that's my job for the team, so I've just got to keep doing that each week.
If Mullen and Abraham remain sidelined, the question of who will partner Brown in the halves remains open. Kurt Gidley did against the Bulldogs, but has been starring at fullback. And with no obvious replacement, another Mr Fix-It in Todd Polglaze comes into calculation.
I sort of prefer the outside backs and that, but I'm happy to fill in anywhere they want me to.
Whatever the case, preparation for any new half combination is vital.
Definitely you've got to train there and let the team get the feel of you there and see the way you're playing the calls and that, and just getting thrown in 4 or 5 hours, it's hard for anyone.
Meanwhile, Danny Medeiros and Kurt Gidley will enjoy a few days off after fitting in 3 games in 7 days. Jim Callanan, NBN News. There's no doubting the success of Curry's Chad Reed. Yet to turn 25, he's our 6th highest earning sportsman after pulling a conservative $8 million last year alone racing in America. And in a rare appearance, Reid is returning to where things all began to race in his home region.
For certain, this will be the biggest motocross crowd probably in Australia in the last 10 years, maybe even longer.
It's a massive coup for the area, with the world runner-up set to take on Australia's best in the National Motocross round at Barley Ranch Raceway on May 20, and already interest is high.
We saw him in Daytona Supercross back in March, and there was 75,000 people there, and Chad had 4 security guards around him. Actually, I'll have 2 security guards for him.
And it'll be a real family affair, with his cousin Craig Anderson to race as defending series champion, while his dad and brother help set up the racetrack.
Dad and little brother build the track, and Chad comes home and hopefully wins on it.
That's exactly what fellow Curry kid Casey Stoner did in China yesterday in the MotoGP. He now leads the overall Riders' Championship from Valentino Rossi by 15 points.
It was a devastating discovery for Fred Good and members of the Maitland sub-branch. 2 marble plaques were levered off the Boer War Memorial and smashed into several pieces. It's a sad and stark contrast after a near-record crowd for Anzac Day in Maitland.
Shocked, because after having such a wonderful Anzac Day, particularly with the people, the way they stood out in the rain, then to have this happen so close, it's total disrespect for our ex-servicemen and women that died.
The memorial wall was built in memory of the 275 men from Maitland and surrounding towns who fought in the Boer War, and for the 13 who paid the supreme sacrifice. The Boer War lasted from 1899 to 1902. At least 12,000 Australians served, with around 600 killed in southern Africa. And with so many lives lost, it's difficult to comprehend such a senseless crime.
It's inconceivable, but I know what I'd like to do if I caught them. Put an 80-pound pack on their back and send them over the Owen Stanleys.
Jane Goldsmith, NBN News.
For the past 8 weeks, police have patrolled Newcastle's known trouble spots on foot and in vehicles in a bid to stop late-night alcohol-related crime and violence from occurring in the inner city. Police say since the high-visibility operations began, weekend assaults have declined. However, they simply don't have the resources to run them indefinitely.
Certainly we've got funding now to continue the operations for another 4 weeks, and then it'll be reassessed after that.
They're now trying to find long-term solutions.
Trying to look at different strategies that could be implemented. We're certainly doing a lot of research on the effects of having a 1 a.m. curfew and the 3 o'clock closures.
Bringing in a 1 a.m. curfew, which would only stop people from entering licensed venues after 1 a.m, not mean pubs and clubs would shut at 1, is something many community groups are pushing for, claiming it would stop people from roaming the streets in between venues. There is some support for a curfew amongst the people it would directly affect.
I actually think it's good because every single one of my friends has been bashed on the street. And it's always been between the hours of 2 and 5.
But there's even more opposition.
It's only going to bring out the violence on the street, I think, so it's
probably not going to work out as well as I think they hope. So I think the 1 a.m. curfew's ridiculous.
But implementing a curfew won't be easy. Unless licensed venues agree to a lockout, council and/or the police will have to lodge an application with the Liquor Administration Board under Section 104 of the Liquor Act, and then more than likely take their case to the Land and Environment Court. While neither the police nor council has decided to take court action, unless things drastically improve, they could be left with little choice. Tomorrow night we find out exactly why so many residents, the business community and welfare groups desperately want a citywide lockout. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The recently built Alto apartment block is 10 stories high, and if you think that's imposing, get ready for the future. Charlestown is destined to have many large buildings with up to 15 floors, and the council is willing to alter the current height regulations to make it happen. Lake Macquarie Council asked a Sydney planning consultant to draw up a vision for Charlestown, and the $100,000 plan includes bigger buildings balanced by wider footpaths and more landscaping.
We're looking at increasing the density within Charlestown to accommodate increased population, so residential dwellings, but also increased commercial floor space.
Under the plan, which will go on public display soon, traffic would be returned to the Pearson Street Mall and the Pacific Highway would be reduced from the current 6 lanes to 4.
Improving the amenity along the Pacific Highway so we can widen the footpaths, improve the landscaping, and make it much friendlier for people to walk along and shop along the highway.
The large cranes hovering over Charlestown are currently helping build 2 more 10-storey buildings. And with the major redevelopment of Charlestown Square also in the pipeline, the suburb is attracting big business and will look very different in the not-too-distant future. Paul Lobb, NBN News.
Cows contentedly graze along the road's edge, not because there's a lack of feed in the paddocks, rather the green grass on Norfolk Island is their smorgasbord. Although there's usually plenty of rain, all properties on the island must have a 45,000 litre tank installed because there's no public water storage. The remoteness of the island means it can boast some of the cleanest air on the globe, but that isolation also creates challenges for Norfolk's eco-friendly, with the cost of freight severely inhibiting the recycling of many materials. Residents do what they can, sorting their own rubbish at the waste centre and bringing garden clippings, which are transformed into a rich mulch and sold back to the public.
We've got some pretty serious weeds that grow very quickly here, so the amount of material that's generated compared to the population is very, very high.
But while there's a surplus of some things, there is a shortage of others.
Surprisingly, this is the only stretch of beach where sand mining is allowed. The island's about to invest $60,000 on a glass crusher, which will grind around 400 tonnes of glass drink bottles and jars into a sand substitute that can be used for drainage and construction.
Individual efforts also make a difference. Julian Cameron runs a coffee plantation with an environmental conscience. It's pesticide-free and the pungent company car is powered using vegetable oils recycled from local restaurants.
I liken it to a barbecue smell. Some days, depending on where the oils come from, the majority, some days it smells more like prawn crackers from the Chinese takeaway, other days it's more like fish and chips from the fish and chip shop.
Jessica Phillis, NBN News.
While he's getting encouraging results from doctors, Jared Mullen still has a bit to do in order to play the Warriors on Saturday night.
It's obviously important for us if he can play, but it's not vital. What's vital is that we get him right.
While named at halfback to play the Warriors, his coach wants Mullen to be running freely by Thursday. If not, Origin hopeful Kurt Gidley is the likely replacement at halfback.
We weren't unhappy with what Kurt did last week. We thought he did pretty well, and he'll be better for it as well.
It was an extended night squad named today, given the uncertainty over Mullen, while Daniel Abraham is only an outside chance of returning. Forward Mark Tafua earns his first starting spot, while Clint Newton comes back into the pack in the front row to partner Josh Perry. And we can reveal that Perry, who comes off contract this year, met with a team in Sydney yesterday as he looks to shore up his playing future.
What will be, and if I'm playing footy, I'll get the deal I want, where I want.
The Warriors, meanwhile, will be without centre Tony Martin and 5'8" Michael Witt for Saturday's clash. Both were suspended for a week after this tackle at the weekend. Jim Callanan, NBN News.
Horsing around was not only condoned in Scone today, it was actively encouraged. Around 170 horses and 92 floats comprised the 2007 Scone Horse Festival Parade, with crowds lining the town's main street and taking to any vantage point they could find to watch the event.
The drought's probably had an effect on it as well, but overall with the parade, it's probably the biggest parade that we've ever had.
But the real equine action was taking place at the Scone Charity Rodeo. This year, a record 340 competitors took part in the event. The fact it offered a prize purse of $15,000, which is almost 3 times the usual amount of cash up for grabs in New South Wales rodeos, no doubt a draw card, and ensuring competitors were of the highest quality.
Well, we've actually got the 3 best bucking stock. We've got the best saddle bronc horse in Australia in open road, the bareback horse of the year Turnbuckle, he's here, and also the bucking bulls of 2005 and 2006.
Weighing in at 800 kilograms, this temperamental fellow called Loco is the best bucking bull of the year, and riders tonight will be out to tame the beast. Madeline Bond, NBN News.
The way things began for the home side, you thought it was going to be all one-way traffic. But Western quickly turned things their way, thanks to David Elvey, who pinched their first points. And when fullback Ben McAlpine finished off, the visitors enjoyed a 4-point lead. But that was something which changed throughout the first half, as the two teams traded tries before Newcastle went to the break up 22-14. Country Player of the Year last season, Newcastle fullback Dean Amos showed he hasn't lost any of his match-winning plays. Luke Thompson probably won't score an easier try when he literally caught Newcastle out to get Western back within reach. But Newcastle killed off any comeback just as quickly. Amos picking on the fatigued visitors with footwork his teammates never get tired of watching. Newcastle now plays away to the North Coast in 2 weeks. The Hunter Jaegers wore black armbands in memory of inaugural club captain Greg Gilmore before captain Jane Menzies took up the fight to Melbourne. But it was the Phoenix forcing the worst out of the home side, and as turnovers mounted up, so did the goals. Melbourne taking a 2-0 lead at the first change. Aware of Alex Harding's ability, the Jaegers shooter rarely got this much space on goal, while Lara Weller made the most of her chances as well. It was Melbourne's depth that really shone. Missing 3 Australian representatives, they hardly seemed phased. The Jaegers changed their line-up as they fought for every goal. Karen Bailey reeling in the visitors' lead to just 6 by full time as Melbourne won 48-42.